I know ISRA began the New Investigators Program in 2008 at the World Meeting in Budapest to support professional development of aggression scholars who are getting started or in the early stages of their aggression research career. And NIs over the years include enrolled doctoral students, postdoctoral fellows, and early career researchers within 3 years of their terminal doctoral degree. NIs receive partial monetary support to attend the World Meeting, where they participate in a pre-conference workshop and are connected with senior aggression scholars. The program has evolved over the years to also include and support NI engagement during the 2 years in between the World Meetings. And I think a wonderful example of this is why we're here today, which is the first time that we'll have NIs present at the ISRA Speaker Series. And we're really excited to hear from the 4 NIs who are here today. So if you're interested in the NI program or want to kind of share it with colleagues or students, check out the ISRA webpage or feel free to contact Tom or myself about it. So our first speaker today is Dr. Elizabeth Summerall, who earned her doctoral degree in social psychology from the University of New South Wales in 2021. She transitioned into a postdoctoral role there, investigating the efficacy of brain stimulation to improve anger regulation and reduce aggression in intoxicated individuals. Liz has recently begun a new chapter as a lecturer at the University of Adelaide, I think I pronounced that correctly, where she plans to explore her broader interests, understanding the cognitive, social, and neurobiological factors that contribute to the way we experience and regulate anger and aggression. So I will turn it over to Liz, and I will say she is in Australia, so you can figure out what time it is. It is not a time that any of us were up ourselves. So we are very appreciative of Liz being here. And Liz, take it away.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'll just get my screen shared with you all. Okay, how's that?
It looks good. We can see it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me as part of the speaker series. I am really thrilled to be here despite the time of day. And I do apologize. I am a little bit unwell at the moment, so please bear with me over the next 10 minutes or so. All right. So it will come as no surprise to you all that alcohol is a common instigator of aggressive behavior. Alcohol is more strongly associated with aggressive behavior than any other psychotropic substance. And acute alcohol consumption is implicated in close to 50% of violent crime globally. So not surprisingly then, the personal and societal costs of alcohol-related aggression are enormous, amounting to billions of dollars each year. Most interventions for alcohol-related aggression tend to occur at the societal level, things like taxes and lockout laws. However, these kinds of approaches vary in their effectiveness, and they don't really allow us to address the causal mechanisms that underlie this kind of behavior. One of the key aims outlined in ISRA's mission statement is to address brain and physical processes that underlie the human capacity for aggression. And in line with those aims, the study I'll be talking to you about today is part of a larger project that I worked on over the last few years with Professor Tom Denson during my postdoc. And broadly speaking, we're interested in understanding and regulating brain systems involved in alcohol-related aggression. To do this, we ran multiple studies, both manipulating and measuring brain activity, and I'll be walking you through one of those today. There are many theories of alcohol-related aggression, and almost all of them implicate the prefrontal cortex. And they theorize that prefrontal cortical dysfunction is the mechanism by which alcohol is causing aggressive behavior. That is, alcohol intoxication reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex, altering subsequent cognition and causing emotion dysregulation and disinhibition. And in particular, we know that the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is an important subcortical region for these processes. There's a good deal of evidence for the role of the VMPFC in aggression. For example, lower gray matter density in this region is associated with a greater likelihood of being in physical fights, We see this in children and adolescents who show disruptive behavior. And we see reduced VMPFC activity for participants who are high in trait aggression and during lab aggression paradigms. And so it follows that perhaps enhancing activation within this region might reduce aggressive behavior. And there's a bit of evidence to suggest that that is the case. So studies in sober participants show that active stimulation over the VMPFC can reduce aggression in different lab aggression paradigms. And so what we were interested in doing in this particular study was examining whether this might also be the case for intoxicated aggression in the lab. So we recruited social drinkers. They were mostly students, and we randomly assigned them to drink alcohol or not. Participants in the alcohol condition consumed a dose consistent with a breath alcohol reading of around 0.07. And then they were randomly assigned to receive either active or sham TDCS over the VMPFC while playing the anger-infused ultimatum game. This particular task is similar to standard ultimatum game paradigms. So participants receive offers that vary in fairness and make decisions about whether to accept or reject them. However, in this version of the game, offers are accompanied by messages from their ostensible partners that match the fairness of the offers. And the idea, as the name suggests, is to amplify angry reactions to those unfair offers. Okay, we saw a main effect of alcohol condition that was in line with what we would expect. Intoxicated participants were more aggressive than sober participants. And we also saw a main effect of offer type, where fair and medium offers were accepted more than unfair offers. So again, in line with what we would expect. Interestingly, we saw a main effect of TDCS such that participants in the active stimulation condition were more aggressive than participants in the sham stimulation condition. However, our main effects and two-way interactions were qualified by 2 3-way interactions of alcohol with TDCS and offer type. So I'm going to unpack those now. So for participants who received active stimulation, so those on the left, people who drank alcohol rejected fewer unfair and medium offers than those who did not drink alcohol. So participants who drank alcohol were less aggressive than sober participants when receiving active stimulation. For participants who received sham stimulation, so those on the right, there were no differences between alcohol groups on rejections of any offer type. However, we also tested whether there was an effect of TDCS among intoxicated participants, and our analyses found no differences between intoxicated participants who received active or sham stimulation. So our research finds only partial support for stimulation over the VMPFC as a means of reducing intoxicated aggression. We've speculated quite a bit about these findings and the mixed results. Perhaps it's the case that stimulation produced different psychological valuation processes for intoxicated compared to sober participants. Perhaps in intoxicated participants, active stimulation is increasing self-regulation and behavioral constraint, whereas in sober participants, perhaps it's increasing self-interest or the perceived benefit of aggression in that context. However, I think it's important to note the limitations of the anger-infused ultimatum game paradigm as well. Rejecting an offer does confound motivations for personal gain and harm doing. So it could be that rejection of an offer is due to a motivation to win money or hurt the proposer or both. So it would be really interesting to try and replicate this study with other paradigms like the Taylor aggression paradigm that don't confound these variables. And of course, as this research is in such an early stage, it's also unclear what the ideal stimulation parameters are. Should the stimulation be more intense or longer in duration? Does it need to occur before rather than during the task? There's a lot that we still don't know about how to really optimize this. We also need to consider the nature of the sample. We did have to exclude problematic drinkers in this case to meet our ethical requirements. We also know that intoxicated people are more likely to aggress when they possess traits that make them susceptible to aggressive behavior. We have some ability to test this, but we haven't yet done so. So that will be really interesting to kind of delve into further. And finally, targeting the VMPFC makes theoretical sense, but it is, of course, only one region within a network of subcortical structures that interact to influence intoxicated aggressive behavior. So in some ways, we are left with more questions than answers. But to conclude, we did show for the first time that active TDCS stimulation can lower aggression in intoxicated people. And although the data were mixed, the study provides a nice starting point for extension and replication. There certainly remains much to be explored in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for being under 10 minutes. You have 30 seconds to spare if you just want to chat for a few minutes.
Lovely.
For a few seconds.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you. Just for everybody, we'll be saving to make sure that everybody has their 10 minutes. We'll save the questions to the end. I certainly have questions. And I'm sure others do as well. And I think we'll move on to the next speaker. For me, it's a great honor. There's somebody that I've been following his articles and his work. So I'm very happy to introduce to you our NI number 2, Alisson P. De Almeida. He's a doctoral student in behavioral neuroscience at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And his research focuses on the neural basis of social behaviors in mice. He's particularly interested in the effects of social stress on social defensive behavior, and he aims to understand how social stress shapes the brain and changes the way that an animal perceives its conspecific. To this end, he works with different tools in basic science for mapping neural circuits, techniques for the functional manipulation of these circuits, and methods for monitoring neural activity in freely behaving animals. Very interesting stuff. Alisson, please.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
and
yes.
Can you see my presentation? It's fine. Okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great opportunity for me to present to such a diverse audience like the ISRA. And I hope you enjoyed my work. And today I will present one of my projects, that is the neural and behavior effects of social stress in mice, a focus on social defensive behavior. So in this work, we are trying to answer one question: how does social stress change the defensive behavior in future social conflicts? What does this mean? We are trying to understand how past experience of social stress can impact the way an individual face new situations of social stress. And we think that this is important because everyone knows that during the life of social animals, situations of social stress or social conflicts are so common. And this in nature for example, is common because of the lack of research. So there is a lot of agonist encounter due to the lack of food or in territory. So these animals fight each other and try to stabilize the group. But also in the human society, this social stress is very common and can do it for other more complex situations. Like, for example, during a discussion between brothers, so they are trying to decide which game to play, or during the relation between boss and employees. So the social stress is a norm in the life of social animals like us. And we are trying to understand the effects of this social stress on brain and behavior of individuals. And here I need to do a disclaimer, because even though we are in the society for research for aggression, I would like to bring the other side of this story, that's defensive behavior. So every time that someone is attacking to another, the other individual is defending itself. And this defensive behavior is such important for integrity of the individual, but is also important for the group stability. It's the defensive behavior that allows the existence of winners and losers after a fight. And this is important for the group. And here I would like to the point that to be a loser or to be socially defeated can have a huge impact on the life of individuals. This is true for animals. So we have a lot of studies in rodents like rats and mice that says that after social defeat, so if a mice be chronically defeated by an aggressor, the mice or the rats tend to be more anxious, express more anxious-like behavior, more depressive-like behavior. And this is also true for humans. So everyone knows that even an early event of social stress, like during your childhood, during bullying, for example, can have a huge impact on the entire life of an individual. So the social stress is a key factor that can impact brain and behavior of both animals and humans. And that's why we are interested in these effects. And here I can return to my question. So how does social stress change the defensive behavior in future social conflicts? That's my question. That's what we are trying to answer. And here I will bring some data that we already have, but this is work that we are doing right now. So first, as Tom presented me, I work more with basic research. So I work in the laboratory and I work with mice. And I use the mice in this resident intruder paradigm to model a situation of social defeat. During this paradigm, I have resident that is the owner of the cage, so in this case the white one, and I have the intruder that is the intruder in this cage. I put this intruder in the resident cage, and with this the resident starts to express aggressive behavior towards the intruder. So I bring a video to show you this here. So here you can see that this white is black mouse intruder, and then expressing what we call as defensive behavior. So you can see that the intruder is at the white, and the intruder is trying to preserve mainly his back. So that is the defensive behavior. That's what we observe in our laboratory. That's the main behavior that we observe. And in a previous work of our laboratory, we showed that, here. So in a previous work of our laboratory, we showed that their exposure to social stress can impact on the way that the mice behaves during this paradigm. So what we did, we put the mice to one session of this social stress or to 3 sessions of this social stress. In these 3 sessions was 1 session per day during consecutive days and with different aggressors. And with this, we saw that the mice tends to express, to have a more passive pattern to respond to aggression in a more passive way. So what we saw, the mice decrease the time that they explore the cage. So they explore the resident cage during the 3rd exposure to social stress, and they do more defensive behaviors during this 3rd day, and mainly the defense. And this passive defense is when the mice is freeze when the resident is away. So the mice stay freezing, just wait the resident to do whatever the resident is doing. So in this increase by that, if we re-expose the mice to this social stress. And we saw this behavior change, and we also evaluated the brain activity by an indirect marker, that is this phosphoprotein marker. This phosphoprotein tells us if a region is activating during a task or not. So what we saw is that a region called medial amygdala less activation during the 3rd day of social stress in comparison to the 1st day of social stress. So we saw that after exposure to social stress, there's behavior changes and also brain activation changes. And this medium middle is mainly for mice because this medium middle is a key region to process social cues about conspecifics. This medium middle receives information of olfactory cues from the vomeronasal organ, and this olfactory cues for mice is the main source of information about the conspecific. So medium middle is processing the conspecific in this. With this, we told the social stress change in the way the mouse perceives the aggressor, perceives its conspecifics, and if this change in the way the mice defends itself during this re-exposure. So this we are start to address this right now, and the first experiment in the experiment that I have right now until now is we did the stimulation of media amygdala during this third exposure to social defeat. So with this, we aim to see if this stimulation of media amygdala is sufficient to prevent the behavior changes after exposure. So for this, we use an approach called chemogenetic, where we inject a amygdala that allows us to stimulate this region after applying a drug, and this drug is the CNO. So we injected the virus in mice, wait weeks, and then expose these mice to 3 sessions of social fit. And before the last session, we apply saline, that is our control, and CNO to stimulate the medial amygdala. And with this, we are able to that the stimulation of medial amygdala can prevent these behavioral changes. So here we have our control. The controls more or less exploring the third exposure, social defeat, do more behaviors in passive defensive behaviors. But our experimental, when we stimulate the medial amygdala, we'll see these behavioral changes. So with this task, we can show that the stimulation of medial amygdala during the third exposure to social defeat impairs the expected changes in defensive behavior. And with this, we can say that the less activation of medial amygdala is important for the behavioral changes induced by social stress. And now we are trying to understand what is the relation between social stress and this difference in activation of medial amygdala. And that is what we are trying to understand now, how does social stress affect medial amygdala activity. And yeah, I don't have data from this until now, but I hope in a future brief I can present to you more data about this. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Alisson.
Thank you. And I want to remind everybody that all 4 of our NIs presenting today are from the 2022 cohort who met at the Ottawa World Meeting. And Tom and I will soon be excited to announce the 2024 cohort. That process is underway, so in a couple of weeks. Our next presenter is Ava Bravo Castillo, who is a doctoral student in educational psychology at the University of Cordoba in Spain. Her research focuses on understanding the psychosocial processes that occur within the peer group, such as friendship dynamics, social status, and group norms, and that play a role in the perpetuation and maintenance of bullying. Within her research team, she participates in numerous projects funded by a variety of international institutions, and she's also received support for 3 different international study abroad stays. One at the University of Groningen, supervised by Professor René Veenstra. The second at Pontificia University, this is testing my language, Pontificia University, can you help me, Anna? Caracola de Chile, supervised by Professor Christian Berger, and the third at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, supervised by Professor Dorothy Espelage, as part of Fulbright predoctoral fellowship. So we're very excited to hear Anna's presentation today. So Anna, take it away.
Okay, do you can listen me?
Yep, we can hear you, and I see your slides.
Okay, perfect. Thank you everybody to coming. I am going to present the result of one of the last study that we are developed as part of my thesis that I the dissertation of the thesis the last week, so that was exciting, 2 weeks ago. I am a member of the Laboratory of Study of Convivence and Prevention of Violence, and we are going to talk about the social structure of participation and defending trajectory in bullying situations. Okay, bullying is a set of intentional negative behavior repeated over time in which there is an imbalance of power between the aggressor and the victims. But bullying is a social phenomenon in which classmates develop different roles. From this perspective, Sami Bali and colleagues identify 4 different roles which are assumed by the bystanders: assistant, reinforcer, who assume a pro-bullying attitude, and defender of the victims, and the last one will be the outsider who remain passive. Over the past nearly 3 decades since the publication of this work, several studies have identified the same role configuration across the world from the late childhood to adolescence. Despite this, some studies also have found some important limitations related with the correlation between roles and the difficulty to assign some student to a specific role. This limitation of the conceptualization of roles could be associated with the categorical and mutually exclusive perspective. And we need to develop a new study that adopts the description of roles as a continuum where each student is assigned to a score within the role, and from a longitudinal perspective to identify changes in the role adopted by students. Although this perspective has been adopted in some recent study on victimization and aggression, less is known about the role of defendant, and this is a relevant role to stop the bullying repetition and perpetuation. So this was one of the important objective of the study, and another one is related with the characteristic of the classroom. Is the place where the bullying is repeated and is more frequent. The classroom could be organized in 3 big structures. The normative adjutant is related with the behavior that are considered appropriate and desirable in the classroom to promote the democratic school climate, the pro-social behaviors, and the social acceptance acts. And another will be related with the social skills and accepted student by their peers. And the last one is the self-perceived popularity. In this case, we are focused in the perception of the individual about their popularity, because the classroom characteristic we can talk about them by the peers, but also by the individuals. And this self-perception could be more important when we are talk about behavior that is self-motivated, such as in this case, defenders. So these 2 false aims was covered in the study published last year in the Journal of School Psychology. A total of 3,303 adolescents took part in the study. In the paper, Grow Mixture Modeling show a better description of the data, and 4-class model solution was the best one. We found a large group of adolescents who describe a high stability changing tendency in defending behavior, 2 groups which describe an opposite changing tendency, one increase in the involved and another reduce the involved in defending behavior, and a last group of adolescents who describe a low stable tendency of involved in defending behaviors. For defendant trajectory, multinomial logistic regression showed differences in the proportion of early and middle adolescent assigned to each trajectory group. This will be related with the differences in the tendency of involved in bullying situation across the developed from childhood to adolescent. Future research should include the childhood stage to explore the longitudinal tendency from the involved of adolescent. And we also found differences related with the gender. Boys had a high probability to be assigned in a stable low and decreased than in a stable high group. Future educational programs should include new socialization methods that promote critical thinking and advocative an ascent of gender stereotype, and they associated with behavior pattern more associated defending with the girls and the boys. And related with the tendency of changing of age dependent trajectory and the normative and social adjustment and the self-perceived popularity, we found that the association between the high level in the three variables and the defending behavior might require a longitudinal stability in the both, so in the behavior and also in the perception in these three contexts in the classroom. And the changes in defending behavior are not related to the current level in these variables. Future research students should focus in what other variables can influence in the start and defending behavior, such as the moral sensitive or the self-efficacy to defend, that could be a relevant role to start or stop the behavior. However, we found a longitudinal association between defending behavior and the two kind of adjustment in a different tendency in between the adolescent who decrease they involve in defender were also associated with a decrease in their self-perception of their behavior is conform with the classroom norms and these normative and more democratic behaviors, while adolescent who increased in defending was associated with a raised perception of social skill and cohesion and group belonging. Also, our results are in line with the two phases model, which propose that the associativity between the actual behavior and the social position go through two phases. In the first one, the emergency phases, the behavior guides the social position. So adolescents who start or increase their involved in defending behavior may be perceived themselves as more popular, and this attribution improve the probability to maintain the behavior, and this will be the maintenance phase. And we find that stable in defending also are stable in their perception as popular. So in this, the home messenger will be the first one. Bullying roles should be understood as a role that the individual assume and acquire, which is changeable and stable, and we need to explore this change in another roles. For example, in what happened with the bullies and their reinforcer, how is the change in the tendency to involve in these behaviors, and also to explore different roles together at the same time to allow a more complex and approximated reality to the classroom, because adolescents can assume more than one role at the same time. And the second home messenger will be defending should be described as a part of social and relational dynamic, which is influence in the evolution in the role. In this sense, we find two main conclusions. On the one hand, feeling part of the group and having adequate normative developed is a key in the maintaining involved in defending, but what was before, that was one of the limitations of the study, because we don't explore the causal association between the variables, and this could be very interesting because we find tendencies of changes in the behavior and also in the perceptions. And on the other hand, adolescents who self-perceive as popular decide to defend their peers, but these adolescents who they perceive as popular are perceived by their peers as popular too, or only is a self-perception. And the most important, who perceive that adolescent as popular? Their friends, the victims, and this is another working that we are continuing in my postdoc, as is all. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. It's very interesting. I think we'll move directly on to Dr. Karoline Dyduch-Hazar. She's a postdoc at the Julius Maximilians University of Würzburg in Germany. She completed a PhD in experimental social psychology at SWPS University in Warsaw, Poland. And she was a recipient of the Lagerspitz Award and Fulbright Junior Research Fellowship at Virginia Commonwealth University, where I used to work, in Richmond, the United States, Richmond, Virginia. She was a principal investigator at numerous research grants funded by the Polish Ministry of Education and Science and National Science Center. Psychology of revenge holds a special place in her research agenda, and she says in her heart. She examines consequences of enacting revenge, as well as motives for taking revenge. Apart from exploring the vicious dynamics of revenge, she also tries to better understand sadism, masochism, and Schadenfreude. Wow, that's a lot. Karoline, all yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me for this symposium. Today, I will be talking about the experience of Schadenfreude at suffering of one's enemy. One can wonder, why should we study Schadenfreude? We all know that people experience Schadenfreude response, which is a German word that stands for joy at other people's suffering. So let me briefly explain you what is the background of our study. So previous work by my collaborators, Miczke and Eder, found that victims have blast when they observe the provocative opponent suffer from their retaliatory punishment. This pleasure was indicated as genuine smiling response. Participants smiled when they witnessed provocative opponents suffer, and this smiling response was quantified as increased activity of zygomaticus major muscle and orbicularis oculi muscle, and decreased activity of the corrugator supercilii muscle. These findings were quite recently published in Psychophysiology if you want to look at them more closely. However, it remains unclear what participants felt exactly joyful about. In other words, what was the source of this malicious pleasure? So on the one hand, participants could simply have succeeded in reaching the retaliatory goal. Like the literature on revenge shows that revenge can be rewarding as it decreases accessibility of aggressive thoughts or brings victims back towards emotional balance. However, it's also plausible that participants simply experienced Schadenfreude at the suffering of the provocateur. It's also possible because people generally dislike punishing others, but to lesser extent if they punish a provocateur. So to better understand the origins of this vengeful pleasure and take the findings of Miczke and Eder forward, we examined whether participants would show the similar smiling response when seeing a provocative opponent suffer from the noise blast administered by the computer. So unlike in the previous study, when participants themselves actively contributed to the punishment of the provocateur, here they merely observed computer doing it for them. Smiling index was calculated exactly as in the previous research done by Miczke and Eder, that is as increased activity of the zygomaticus major and orbicularis oculi, and decreased activity of the corrugator supercilii muscle relative to the baseline activity. To test these predictions, we recruited 43 volunteers from the university pool of participants. As you can see, sadly, men were severely represented in our study. Participants took part in the competitive reaction time task. I believe most of you are familiar with this paradigm, but I will explain this paradigm a little bit in case someone is unfamiliar with this task. So in the classical version of this paradigm, participants are led to believe they interact with another individual or sometimes even several individuals in the task that allegedly assesses reaction time in the competitive game. The task consists of several trials, and in the beginning of each trial, both participant and their alleged opponent are asked to indicate the intensity of the noise blast, or sometimes also duration of the noise blast, that their alleged non-existing in reality opponent will hear if they lose the given trial. Participants are informed that their opponents also provide such ratings. The task itself is very simple. Participants are instructed to react as quickly as possible the moment the yellow circle changes the color to the green, and they are being told if they will be slower than the opponent, they will hear the noise blast. Obviously, the task is entirely pre-programmed, and us researchers control when participants loses and wins the given trial. In our version of the task, participants did not choose the intensity of the noise blast in the beginning of the trial. It was the computer that randomly selected the value between 3 and 5, so corresponding to medium and high levels of the intensity of the noise blast. Overall, participants interacted with 8 other students located at different rooms at the university. Half of those opponents were provocative guys, and so provocative guys consistently use the noise blast of very high intensity in the task, so levels 4 and 5. This usually elicits vengeful motivations in participants, and this is typically rated as very aversive experience. Unprovocative opponents, on the other hand, were the good guys, and they consistently used the noise blast of the very low intensity. Each of those opponents was featured twice, which gives us 16 blocks. Each of these blocks consisted of 10 trials, and participants lost half of those trials. This is the example of the given trial. So in the beginning of the trial, participants played the competitive reaction time task with their alleged opponent. If participants lost the trial, participants was informed what was the intensity of the noise blast their alleged opponent had set for them. After patiently waiting for 3 seconds, participants heard the noise blast. However, if participants won a trial, they were informed what value, what intensity the computer chose to deliver to their alleged opponent. Participants were also informed that when they win the trial, they will have the opportunity to see their opponent through allegedly live video feed. So for example, in the neutral face expression condition, participants saw their opponent just sitting in front of the computer, nothing specific happened. However, in the pain expression condition, their opponents displayed visible signs of suffering from the noise blast administered by the computer. We expected that participants' smiling response will be way larger, where observing the provocative opponents showing signs of suffering from the noise blast delivered by the computer. That would be the indicative of Schadenfreude response. It happened indeed. So as you can see in this figure, participants' smiling response was larger when observing the provocative opponent showing signs of suffering versus showing neutral face expression. However, participants' smiling response was way smaller when observing unprovocative opponent showing signs of suffering versus showing neutral face expression. This indicates that participants show distress when observing the opponent who was undeservedly punished or undeservedly suffered. So overall, participants disapproved the unfair punishment or unfair suffering of the opponent. What are the conclusions of this study? First of all, these findings indicate that active involvement in the retaliatory punishment is not necessary to make the victim feel satisfied. This is because participants had similar smiling response as in previous research when they themselves were responsible for delivering the punishment to the provocateur. These findings stand quite in contradiction to the previous research on revenge, which shows that participants themselves want to deliver the message to the transgressor, and actually what makes revenge satisfactory is the provocateur's understanding of the message. Yeah, I actually said that already, so yeah, sorry for that. Seeing the enemy of transgressor suffering is just as satisfying as punishing him or her personally. Thank you very much for listening. That's all on my side.
Thank you, Karolina. Thank you very much. That was, and thanks for everybody for not having to, not making me stop you when you ran out of time. I guess we'll open it up to questions if anybody would like to ask something.